It's 10 years since India was rocked by a massive earthquake, 7.6 on the Richter scale, and one of the country's deadliest ever. A region of Gujarat in the northwest was devastated. 20,000 people were killed and hundreds of thousands made homeless. But we found a decade on that all this was just the beginning of a remarkable success story, the regeneration of a shattered region. January the 26th, 2001. 10 to 9 in the morning. Time stopped, and so did thousands of lives. Disaster hit with terrifying ferocity, and there was no warning.
I saw everything around me was moving, but I could not make it that it is an earthquake, because that is not a normal thing over here. So I thought there must be some problem with me. So I said, let's walk out a little bit. I'll have some glass of water or something.
Kunal was visiting a friend in a modern apartment building.
Before I could get out of that building, the whole building collapsed in few seconds. And it was all total darkness after that.
His friend and the parents were all killed. Kunal was lucky to survive.
I woke up in the hospital and I saw my mom and dad and everybody was around me. Only thing that I didn't have my limbs at that time. They were amputated.
Kunal lost both his legs below the knee. He was just 17. His mother nursed him for months, but it was the psychological trauma that haunted him most.
I was under total depression and always thinking that why this thing has happened with me. As I was not aware about the intensity of what earthquake has done. So I used to think that why only I am suffering from this and not anybody else, why this thing has happened to me.
He was certainly not alone. Over 150,000 others were injured. Amina was trapped for 4 days before rescuers dug her out alive. Her 2 children had been crushed to death in the same building. She lost the will to live and only survived 18 months after her ordeal. The government of India called it a national calamity, and the emotional shockwaves raced across the world. These news pictures were filmed by a BBC cameraman whose family's from Gujarat.
I was amazed at how big a reaction there was in the UK, and especially Leicester. This school here, Rashmi School, there's a large Gujarati community, and the youngsters were coming to school worried about their friends and relatives in India, and they wanted to help.
There was an unprecedented wave of sympathy and giving, especially from Gujaratis living abroad. Aid poured in, £85 million in all. The need was vast. Several towns and nearly 8,000 villages were damaged. 500,000 people were left homeless. The city of Anjar became a sea of rubble, and hundreds were buried beneath it. These sad streets have now been rebuilt, but memories of the tragedy here are still raw. The earthquake struck on India's Republic Day. 500 primary school children and their teachers were on a parade. They felt the tremors and they panicked because they thought they were being bombed. They grabbed each other's hands and ran inside the shops, but it turns out that was the worst thing they could have done. Nearly 200 of the children were killed. One school lost over 30 pupils and 3 of its staff. Teachers recall being trapped for hours as people scrambled over the collapsed beams above them.
They were walking over the slabs where we were trapped. We'd pull their feet to get attention and tell them we were alive and to help us. Those people had come to rescue their relatives from their shops, so they rescued them first and then came to help us. People in the shops in front of us and behind us were all killed.
Another miracle happened just around the corner. Jed was a 3-week-old baby in his grandmother's arms when the earthquake hit. She was killed, but somehow he survived. Devastation spanned the whole district of Kutch, the western part of Gujarat. Anjar was virtually destroyed. So too was Bhuj, near the quake's epicentre. As people slowly began to pick up the pieces of their lives, it was hard to imagine a future.
People were hurt, there was a psychological trauma, people lost their means of livelihood. So there was a great need of not only the relief but rehabilitation too.
Outside the towns, the poor were particularly vulnerable. Vital trade links collapsed after the earthquake, and aid convoys didn't reach into this arid hinterland. For the long-suffering women of the remote village of Pitora Nagar, a life of yet more hardship seemed assured. For generations, they survived on what they grew, and crops often failed.
Life was pretty bad. As women, we weren't allowed out of the village on our own. There was no school here, so we would only send the boys to be educated. We had no money and didn't know how to do embroidery work.
But after the earthquake, a small revolution took hold. A women's cooperative restored the water supply and taught them to make and market their embroidery. Now, for the first time, these women are earning money.
Now that we're shareholders in a cooperative, we can get a cheap loan. We can save money. We go and buy medicine without our husbands coming with us. And we've even been able to buy soap and shampoo.
That revolution has rippled across Kutch. As I went from village to village, I discovered the earthquake had propelled them from the Middle Ages to modernity. This is Mita Pashwaria. Funds raised in the UK helped rebuild it completely, and they added a school and even a medical centre, which they'd never had before. The Varga family's little house was wrecked, but now they have a new one, complete with running water and a toilet.
We only had 2 rooms before. Now we've got 3 rooms plus a kitchen. Before the earthquake, we only had this area. And now we've got more space. We've got windows. It's more airy and we've got a compound outside the house. For us, it's great.
To qualify for aid, a husband must now share the ownership of his house with his wife.
That David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya?
Many donors also wanted to improve, not just rebuild. Pupils from Rushmead School in Leicester decided to form a charity to start a secondary school in a village where there was none. The Nagore Rushmead School began in a community hall with just 7 girls and 1 teacher. With his local links, Bhaskar Solanki took on this long-term project. The government gave him some land, and 5 years after the earthquake, bulldozers moved in.
Now the work started, just incredible feeling. waited so long for this.
Within 6 months, the school was ready to open. A group from Leicester came to witness the moment. People in this village had never had so much outside attention, a cause for celebration. The district capital Bhuj in the days after the earthquake. Most people had fled. It was like a ghost town. And for the first 2 years, little changed. While villages were rebuilt quickly, here a whole city had to be redesigned. This was the government official widely credited with the vision to push through radical plans.
The problem started when we got into the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the urban areas. These were congested old towns. Now here the roads needed to be widened, the houses needed to be brought down and reconstructed in such a manner that they were made earthquake-proof.
Today, 10 years on, Bhuj has been reborn and the population is growing fast. On these images, it's possible to see the 2 new ring roads and the hundreds of new homes that have been built. The city centre is busier than ever and shops are thriving. Many suspected aid and state grants would be wasted, but the local government organised the £1.5 billion of reconstruction money better than hoped.
I think the earthquake, as far as Bhuj is concerned, modestly I must mention that this has come as a blessing in disguise, because we are now able to offer to the people civic amenities which they had never conceived many, many years ago. Broad roads, street lights, water supply, drainage, recreation, picnic spots.
The process was far from perfect. The government gave grants to remove debris, but 1,000 people have been accused of falsely claiming £1 million. A few of the international aid agencies were criticised. At the height of the emergency, they flew in pumps, pipes and buckets, but these could have been bought far cheaper locally. And some British donations were diverted to build this traffic island in the richest suburb of Bhuj. But overall, aid has transformed lives. Bhuj had never before had a purpose-built school for children with special needs. This one is also combating the stigma of disability. Putting a positive spin on adversity has helped many victims. Kunal hasn't let his artificial legs slow him down. Before the earthquake, he failed to get on the course he wanted at university. Now he qualifies for a place under a quota for the physically challenged.
I was then into the physically challenged category. So again, I tried for engineering, and luckily I got into mechanical engineering. That is my favorite line. And today I am going to be an engineer actually. So whatever happened, I think it was for my good only.
Kunal and his mother's get up and go reflects the Gujarati entrepreneurial spirit, a dynamism that, coupled with new tax-free zones created by the Indian government, has produced a boom in business investment.
Today in Kutch, there is a maximum investment has been done by, if you compare with any other state or any other within the state to state, So Kutch, I think the investment is done more than $10 billion, and I think $5 to $7 billion are in pipeline.
It's brought a sea change in fortune to the Kutch coastline. For centuries, just acres of salty mudflats. Before the earthquake, a company bought some land here for £7,000. They built a small port. It flourished. Today, the Adani Group is worth over £4 billion. Millions of tons of cargo go through this port at Mundra every year. Everything from cars to coal, medicines to marble. And standing here, it's really hard to believe that 10 years ago, at the time of the earthquake, all this was just a barren salt marsh. Growth was spurred by a plentiful supply of cheap land and labour, and now progress looks unstoppable. Mundra will soon overtake Mumbai to become India's leading port. Thinking ahead to even more lucrative ventures, Adani went on to buy a coal mine in Australia and 2 supertankers to transport it back to India. In a few months' time, this will be the biggest coal terminal in the world, supplying coal via conveyor belt to 2 power stations nearby. Those power plants will provide enough electricity for a population of 25 million people. The power plants are state-of-the-art, highly efficient with half the emissions of a normal coal-fired station. This one was the first in the world to earn carbon credits under international rules.
What we are making here is a power station which is the largest in the country. The first unit on a greenfield site has come in 27 months or 28 months. That is kind of very good.
Modern infrastructure unleashed the energy of Gujarati business. The state is now fueling the powerful growth of India's economy. Here, steel is flattened before being welded into giant pipes for transporting oil and gas. Next door, the same company, Wellspun, makes towels. It's no cottage industry. On every 24-hour shift, they make 250,000 towels to adorn bathrooms in Europe and America. They even took over the British company Christie's, whose wares wipe the brows of Wimbledon tennis champions. Wellspun now dominates the market, and without the earthquake, they wouldn't have come to Kutch.
There was no local taxes was to be paid for 5 years. And there was no excise duties or indirect taxes, what basically goes to central government and the state government. So that was exempted for the first 5 years. So those were primarily the benefits. I think more than that, there was a huge support from the local government so that industry can come faster.
So without the usual red tape and with a small army of cheap labour, business could set the pace.
Normally to put up a plant in India is like a huge task, and I think we started our production from the 0 date within 9 months. The first towel came out, the first pipe came out, so we could commission that, and that is not possible without the help of the local government.
This one factory employs 10,000 people, workers who in the past would have left the region to find a job. Their wages, in turn, help create thousands more jobs in the local community. Companies also have their own social funds, so industry is taking over from development aid.
Soon after earthquake, aid agencies were there, but now industries like us, private industries, Adani, we have taken over the social development work. Our own budget for social development in this region is more than $6 million for a year. So you can imagine that how we are trying to change lives of people to live in better way.
And there's still a lot of work to do. Millions have yet to feel the benefits of the Kutch economic miracle. Media interest has moved away, and it's harder for charities to raise funds. The strong bond between the two Rushimede schools has helped this one maintain momentum. Pupils from Leicester pay regular visits and learn about a different way of life.
If you start a project, it's quite easy to do a build and walk away from it. It's much, much harder to sustain it, and that's one of the things I wanted to do, was sustain the project through the years. Even now, we've been running the school for the last 6 years. It's constant going out with a begging bowl.
But still there's no going back. Ambition now propels Kunal and his homeland forward.
I'm absolutely ready with those limbs, whatever challenge may come. Whether I have to push my bike 5 kilometers, I'm ready for that. Whether I have to run, whether I have to dance, anything, I'm ready for it. Absolutely ready.
This is more than recovery. It's a region reinventing itself. The pain and the poverty are still there, but now there's a brighter future. The Kutch experience has become a model for managing an earthquake. In 10 years, people here have transformed a terrible tragedy into an opportunity for renewal.